Hello and welcome to Religious Studies 361. This is our first class, and the topic today is to draw a clear distinction between morality and the law as two separate spheres of thought and action. Let me start by clarifying what I mean by the law and by morality so we can use those two concepts in a clear manner. The law is what we understand by the legislated law, the law that's legislated by parliaments and rulers. And we're going to refer to this kind of law as positive law or simply the law in general. For morality, I'm going to use the concept of natural law. Natural law theory is one theory of morality. It is certainly not the only one, but it is the one which is more widely accepted. It's a religion-based theory. I will explain what I mean by this later, and I will also talk about other alternatives to natural law later in the class. Natural law theory says that morality is objective and universal. What this means is that what is right here is right everywhere else, morally speaking. What is wrong here is wrong everywhere else in the world. What is right now has always been right and will always be right. And what is wrong today has always been wrong and will always be wrong. Even if in the past, people didn't acknowledge those things as being wrong, and they did it, but they were doing the wrong thing. But morality itself hasn't changed. That's the point with natural law theory. Okay? Now, if that is the case, then for obvious reasons, morality and the law cannot be one and the same thing. If, say, California has a law that allows for the execution of certain criminals, but Hawaii doesn't, then both can be morally right. Either California is doing what is morally right and obligatory, which is to execute certain criminals, or Hawaii is doing what is morally right and obligatory, which is not to execute any human being under any circumstances. But they both can be right. Either California or Hawaii are, in that particular account, morally wrong, morally unjust. And not to say if we compare the legislations of other states or other countries, say US versus Russia or Germany or India or wherever, then the conclusion is a given. No particular legislation represents morality. Some legislations may be more moral than others, but either there is one legislation which is fully moral, and that's very unlikely, or no legislation really represents morality. Legislations change continually all the time. New laws are passed in parliament, rulers make new laws, but morality never changes. Morality stays the same. And it doesn't depend on how we feel about a particular moral issue. I'm referring to this popular idea that what is right and what is wrong depends on how you personally feel about it, what your personal circumstances may be, your culture, your upbringing. Natural law theory says not at all. What is right for you is right for everyone else if that thing is a truly right thing, okay? So for example, we would all agree that killing little babies is wrong. Killing innocent people is wrong. Abusing people is wrong. Denying people their equality is wrong, etc. And we all feel very strongly about this. So if we went to a country where people kill little girls because they don't need any more, for example, we would feel very strongly like telling them, stop doing that. What you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is criminal, is immoral. Well, natural law says, well, certainly that is true. This principle of natural law that prohibits killing innocent people or abusing them is definitely something which we all agree as being self-evident. And natural law theory says, by the same token, all other moral issues have a right and a wrong, even if we disagree on what is right and what is wrong. The fact that we disagree does not mean that there is no right and no wrong, or that the right and the wrong depends on how you personally feel. No. We just don't want to see what is right and what is wrong, which is a different issue. Number two, natural law theory says that we are born with an intuition for what is right and what is wrong. We have this innate knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. Now, if that is the case, then a valid question would be, why do we disagree? Why do we disagree? Why some people think that abortion is right while others think it is wrong? Don't we all see that it is either right or wrong, abortion or euthanasia or animal experimentation or any other issue? Well, the answer that natural law theory gives to this question is, I should say the Christian traditional version of natural law theory is sin, more specifically original sin. Sin brought this weakness into the human soul, into the human mind, this tendency to selfishness, to not wanting to see what is good and what is right, and rather twisting evidence and leading us to persuading ourselves that what is right is that what is wrong is really right, simply because it is in our convenience. I'm sure you've seen this Judge Judy type of shows on TV in which you have two parties arguing about some issue, and you have the judge and they are trying to make a decision. And many times it's hard to tell who's right and who's wrong. But some other times it is so crystal clear that one of the parties is completely wrong that you wonder how the guy has the guts to go on TV and make his case. However, the guy is still trying to make his case and overblowing certain little details and just twisting evidence to his convenience and to favor his position. Well, natural law theory says that's what we all do in our consciences. When we want something, we'll justify murder if that's what it takes to get it. And if we don't want to see that something is wrong, we just will deny the evidence and we will refuse to see it. So my next point is, if that is the question, if that is the case, that we are born with an innate knowledge for what is right and what is wrong, this intuitive innate knowledge, but then we disagree because we are so selfish and so sinful, then what is the use of natural law? Who's to decide what's right and what's wrong? Is there any way to know what's right and what's wrong? If we, despite the fact that we know, we deny our knowledge, who's to say that I am being selfish or that she is being selfish by disagreeing with me? Who's to set this right? Well, the traditional answer is, of course, religious authority. Religious authority. In the old times, under the unified Christendom, that religious authority was the Pope. Today, that principle would apply to any religious authority within any denomination or religion in general. Okay? So, let me summarize these points because they are very important. Okay? By morality, we mean natural law. Natural law theory states that morality is objective and universal. Now, you need to understand what this means, objective and universal. Objective means that it is not subjective. It does not depend on the subject's perception of it or what goes on in his mind or her mind. This book is an objective thing. We all agree this is a book. Now, if someone were to say, well, I do not agree this is a book. I'm sorry, what you have in your hand is not a book, it's a cat. We would think the person is crazy because we all agree this is objectively a book. However, when it comes to moral issues, that's what happens. People say, that's not a book, I really see a cat. Well, maybe you need to see a cat in there for your own purposes or your own self-interest, and that's why you're saying that this is a cat. That's what natural law theory says. But whether something is right or wrong is as objective and clear-cut as the fact that this is a book, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, or see it or not. Right? Remember, the second point is we are born with a knowledge for what is right and what is wrong, as we are born with eyes to see that this is a book. We disagree because of our selfishness and because of our sin. And then someone has to set that straight. That's religious authority. Okay? That morality and the law are two separate spheres is also clear from the fact that we all feel that the conflict sometimes when it comes to certain big issues between what the law requires from us, or even what the law allows people to do, and what we feel strongly should be done. So think of abortion, how people disagree so strongly about abortion. No one is forced to abort, to have an abortion, but still people feel that some people feel that no one should be allowed to have one. Or people who refuse to join the military, to be drafted, or stuff like that, okay? Or euthanasia, many other issues. So in those particular issues, we feel very strongly this conflict between morality and the law, this conflict between these two spheres. That shows we are talking about two different realms. We will, on a separate session, we will discuss Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau's book known as Civil Disobedience, or Resistance to Civil Government. And we will see how he takes this distinction between morality and the law to the very extreme. He draws a really sharp distinction and separation between being a good citizen, that's someone who follows the law, who goes by the book, and being a good person, someone who is moral, who goes by the higher law, by the moral law. And he even thinks that both things are simply incompatible. In the last analysis, they are incompatible for Thoreau. You can be really the perfect citizen and a truly moral person. He says, there's no way. Is that possible? Well, maybe. We said that no legal system really and truly represents morality. We would want to think very strongly, I'm sure you all agree with me, that by being a good citizen, by abiding by the law, by never breaking the law, you are also being a good person. And in fact, I'm sure many of you, if you ever break the law, skip a red light or something, you feel like you're doing something bad. Well, technically speaking, you're not doing anything bad. You're doing something illegal. Because bad, good, just, unjust, fair, unfair, right and wrong are synonymous with moral and immoral. Those are the terms that we apply to moral situations. To legal situations, we only apply two different terms, legal or illegal. And you can be punished by doing something illegal. And moreover, by doing something illegal, sometimes you may also be doing something immoral. Okay? But not necessarily and not always. In other words, being a good citizen is not necessarily the same as being a good person. And being a good person is not necessarily the same as being a good citizen. And Thoreau makes that point extremely clear, okay? In fact, Thoreau asserts that the law is necessarily immoral to a certain degree. How can that be? Well, let me give you an example. Travis, when was the last time that you got a parking ticket? Can we show the students in the class? A couple years ago? How did it feel? Terrible? Okay. Well, when was the last time you got a parking ticket? Never. Oh, that's bad.
Wow.
What was the last time you got a parking ticket?
Last semester?
Last semester, okay. So here we have Travis and George. They both got a parking ticket for the same violation. And the difference is that while Travis is a rich kid, he has lots of money, he couldn't care less about parking tickets. George is working at McDonald's 12 hours a day, making $3 an hour. And same amount of parking tickets, same violation, $60. When Travis seeks his parking ticket, he goes, "Oh well, Daddy will take care of this. A big deal." It's like, but George